All right, we're going to start in Genesis chapter 1. We're going to be doing a synopsis of the Old Testament, which basically means I'm going to run you through the major events of the Old Testament in the order that they happen, because people don't read the Old Testament, and the Old Testament has a lot of really good stuff in it. Paul said that the Old Testament was written as an ensample. Paul also said the Old Testament was written for your admonition. So basically, it's for your learning. So just because we're all the way in the New Testament, you can't abandon the Old Testament. If you get stuck in the New Testament, you're going to miss out on a lot of stuff, okay? Because even though Paul, he teaches the Christian what the Christian is supposed to know for this age, you know, the fulfillment of the second coming, that's all in the Old Testament. Like basically half of the Old Testament has not been fulfilled yet. A lot of the prophecies have been historically fulfilled, but you can go and read the prophets, Isaiah to Malachi, and you can't even name at least a third of them have happened. Most of them have not happened because they have to happen in the future, right? So a lot of Christians get stuck in the New Testament, but you got to remember that if Jesus doesn't come back, literally, your Old Testament is meaningless, right? But he's going to come back literally. So don't abandon your Old Testament. Genesis chapter 1, it starts very simple. It says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, what? He said, let there be light. And then he's saying, God saw the light that it was good, and God divided the night from the day. What did he do? He called the light day and the day night. And he said, and it was good in the beginning. And that was the beginning of the first day. And then he goes on in creation. The second verse, it says, and the earth was without form and void. Something happened. We're not going to get there right now, though. But there's a judgment that happened. And so what does God decide to do in chapter 2, verse 7? You can go there. God decides to create Adam and Eve. And he says, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. You see that? And what happens? He says that he formed Adam from the dust of the ground in chapter 2, verse 7. He breathed into him the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Not according to Oregon and the Catholics, because they say that the Garden of Eden is a metaphor and it didn't literally happen. Well, you can throw them in the garbage because they don't know what they're talking about. Now, in the Garden of Eden, these two are chilling. What happens to Eve? Eve is formed out of Adam's fifth rib, or rather under his rib. And he says, it's not good for man to be alone. We have to make a helpmeet for him. When it says helpmeet, it means what it says. The liberals go and they say, no, it doesn't literally mean helpmeet. Well, what does it mean then? What does it mean then? The liberals don't like the idea of God creating a woman for a man. Haven't you noticed? I mean, this is a little too offensive. But haven't you noticed that in lesbian relationships, there's always the one that's more manly than the other one? It's almost like there has to be some kind of masculinity in the relationship. I don't know where they're getting that from. But I digress. Then you go on chapter 3 in the Garden of Eden. And while the two are chilling, what does God tell them? He says to Adam, he says that of every tree in the garden thou mayst freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it. For in the day that thou eatest of it, thou shalt surely die. Not according to the liberal scholars. They say, no, because Adam lived 900 more years. His spirit died. He did die. He just didn't physically die until 900 years later. Now, what happened? Well, there's a little sneaky guy. He's called a serpent, and he shows up in the garden. He says to Eve, he says, yea, hath not God said that ye should eat every tree of the garden? And she says, well, God told us don't touch it. That's not what God said. God said don't eat it. Eve changed his words. Now, there are some different interpretations. Some people say that Eve was bitter against Adam because she's a secondary creation. Now, there's some evidence for that. I mean, every woman deep down knows they have an inner bitterness against man because women are secondary creations and they know it. So that's why all the liberal women, they have women power and all that stuff. They want to be better than men. Now, it's not that God made man better than women as if to say that women are less than men, but it's just a fact. If I have a woman and I arm wrestle her, I'll break her arm. Okay, it's just physiology. Women are just weaker than men. But women are better than men at some other things. She's a helpmeet. She's meant to complete him. Not according to the liberals. Now, this little sneaky serpent shows up, and what happens? Well, he tempts Eve. Paul says the woman was deceived in the transgression, which means that when Adam sinned, he was not tempted. He chose to die for her. The same way that Jesus chose to die for the church. Because Jesus is called the last Adam. Well, what does that mean? That means when Jesus chose to die for the church, that means that Adam chose to die for Eve. What's the fact of that? No man that's married, very important, no man that ever gets married loves their second wives more than the first one they ever had. Solomon had 1,000 wives, and he still loved Pharaoh's daughter more than the other 1,000. There's just something about the first one that just is different from all the subsequent wives. I don't know. I just noticed that in the Bible. All right, now they get kicked out of their garden. God says, all right, you got to get kicked out of here. That's no good. And so God goes to deal with humanity. And what happens? Genesis chapter 6. Well, humanity just fumbles the bag. Genesis chapter 6. Yo, what's up, brother? How you doing, man? Genesis chapter 6. Genesis chapter 6. Well, God decided, okay, he was going to deal with humanity for about 1,700 years. And what happens? It says, and it came to pass in verse 1, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and took them wives, all that they chose. That is literal history. Even David Daniels, I love the guy, but even he says this did not happen literally. He says that the giants are not the sons of the angels. Well, what else could they be? The Smithsonian actually found 9 foot, 29 size feet, like shoes, and a skeleton that was like 9-10 feet tall. Well, what was that? Well, must have been biblical, because the second they found out where they saw it in the Middle East, they said, no, that was just fake. Somebody planted that there, and then they got rid of it. And they found yeah, they did. What are they so worried about? Isn't the Bible just myth? How about Greek mythology? Isn't all of Greek mythology about some god coming down and having sex with the humans down here, and then they have the offspring of some giant gods, and then they say, those stupid humans, and then they bounce? That's all of Greek mythology. They're getting the giant from somewhere. Somewhere. You know, with all the technology we have, we still can't replicate the pyramids of Egypt. How? Aren't we so intelligent? Yeah, but what human being could pick up the stones that big? He must be Hulk. Right? Oh, Hulk. He's a giant. See? Where the Jews got that from? Right? Okay, so what does God do? Well, God takes the earth, and he says, Noah, you're going to get on up. You're going to make a boat. You're going to make an ark. And what's God going to do? He's going to flood the planet. Not according to the scientists. No, there's no flood. There's no evidence that happened. Are you sure? Most of the land in the world, we are above elevation. Even New York City is elevated above the actual landmass. The oceans go deep, man. Some diver went down like 3,000 feet below sea level or something, and he saw fish there that were living in 31 degrees Fahrenheit temperature. What would the fish be doing down there? That means when God flooded the planet, even though some aquatic life died, they must have survived, because where do fish go? In the water. Now, if you have some fish living you have, a couple dozen miles under the water, well, they must have been there. Who put them there? You know how planes, they have a little cockpilot, and they have like one guy here, one guy here? I'm so serious. There's a fish that literally, the head is transparent, and it has like 2 little seats here and an antler. Would evolution come up with something so ridiculous? No, but God would make something funny like that. God would make something funny like that. I mean, think about it. What do you catch fish with? A fishing rod. There's literally a fish that the bait, it goes like this. It's called an angler fish. Angler fish. It has a hook like this and a little light, and it baits the fish to come eat it. Do you know the humor in that? A fish going fishing? No. Evolution produced that. Oh, get out of here, man, with that. Genesis chapter 12. Humanity screws up. Humanity terribly fumbles the bag. So God says, all right, I'm tired of these Gentiles. I got to get me a special Gentile. So then he goes and he gets Abraham. He gets Abraham. Who is Abraham? The father of the Jewish people. He says, Abraham, get thee out of thy land into a country that I will show thee, and I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless them that bless thee, and I will curse them that curse thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth shall be blessed. Not according to YouTube. They say, no. That verse is only talking about Abraham, not his children. Oh, we'll get there. And I'll show you how dumb they are. All right, so Abraham shows up. What does Abraham do? Well, God tells him, I'm going to give you this land. You know the first thing he does? He goes to the land, but he takes Lot with him. He disobeyed God. So then eventually Lot gets separated, and he goes down to Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham, finally God gets him. And he says, Abraham, look to the north, and look to the south, look to the west, and look to the east, and all the land that thou seest, I will give it to thee, and to thy seed forever. Forever. See that? You either believe it or you don't. These people don't believe it, so they say, oh, God is done with the Jews. Like Brian Denlinger, that moron. The Jews aren't his chosen people. Wrong. Get out of here. Wrong. Heresy, right? All right, so then Isaac shows up. Go to Genesis 22. Isaac shows up. God says, in Isaac shall thy seed be called, not Ishmael. Not Ishmael. Now, not all of Ishmael's kids are the people in the Middle East, but most of them are. That one little boo-boo that Abraham made, sleeping with the bondmaid Hagar, that just destroyed everything. Destroyed everything. That one little boo-boo. Those people are the Jews' greatest enemies today. They're greatest enemies today. See that? So-called Palestinians. The mythological Palestinian. I'm still looking for it. Genesis chapter 22. God wants to test Abraham and his faith. So look what he says. He says in verse 2, take thy son and thy only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering. Not sacrifice him there. The NIV says sacrifice. That is completely different than saying offer him. Because God then intervenes and he says, no, God, Abraham, don't do it. I accept what you did. Well, if it says sacrifice and God told him not to do it, that means God lied. Offer him for a burnt offering, not sacrifice. Now, you know what's interesting? By the time Abraham offered up his son Isaac, he was already almost 100 years old. You know what that means? That for Abraham to offer up his son, Isaac had to not only carry the wood, but he had to put himself on the altar. Who's that a type of? Jesus. Because he had to put himself on the, see that? He had to put himself on the cross. He had to let him go there. Somebody is seeing 3,000, 4,000 years in the future, and they see what's going on. Somebody knows what's going on. No, the Bible's written by man. Oh, dude, I'm tired of people. Genesis chapter 32. Then we get Jacob. His name means supplanter. Jacob is a little troublemaker. He's a liar. He's a liar. He goes, here's Isaac. Isaac is like this. He's blind. He goes, art thou my son, my very son Esau? And Jacob goes, yeah, of course. Yeah. He goes, yeah, I'm your son Esau. Well, how come your arms feel a little weird? Aren't you supposed to be, you feel pretty smooth? And Jacob lies again. And he lies 5 times to Isaac. And then Esau comes in later, and you know what he says? He says, so I brought back the food for you, Isaac. And he goes, oh, Isaac gets scared. Who did I bless? He blessed the wrong person. Because Rebecca decided that she was going to deceive Isaac and give the blessing to Jacob. Give the blessing to Jacob. She tried to help God out. And by doing that, she had to die and pay for it later. Jacob shows up. He's the supplanter. And what happens? Jacob has 12 sons. These are the sons of Israel. Bible calls them the children of Israel. That's Reuben. That's Gad, Manasseh. See that? That's Nephthalim, Judah. Oh, Judah's a real troublemaker. Can you believe Messiah comes from Judah? You remember what Judah did? He slept with the woman who was a prostitute. Well, it wasn't a prostitute. She feigned that she was because she needed a seed to carry on her lifeline, her genealogy. And then she shows up and says, actually, Judah, I have the proof that you slept with me, which is the scepter that he had. Oh, awkward, because Judah says, the woman that did this, she shall be burned. And then she takes the mask off and goes, actually, it's me. And Judah goes, oh, no. Well, we're a very righteous woman. Well, if she had to be burned, that means he had to be burned too because he committed adultery. Oops, Judah. But Genesis 49. But he has these 12 sons. All of these sons are troublemakers. You ever notice why in the Bible, when God addresses the nation of Israel, sometimes he calls them Jacob and sometimes he calls them Israel? Well, because Jacob is the old man and all of Jacob's sons are troublemakers. So because they're troublemakers, them as a nation, the Jewish people as a nation, they have these characteristics of their sons that all add into this one big mesh. But we'll get to that. So he has these 12 sons, and one of the sons is very special. His name is Judah. Go to Genesis 49. Judah is a very special son. Why? Not because of anything that he did, but because of the promise that God gave about Judah through Jacob. It says in Genesis 49:10, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come, and unto him shall be the gathering of his people be. In other words, Messiah, Shiloh, he comes from Judah. Well, the scepter cannot depart from Judah, which means that if any of the seed in the future gets corrupted, Messiah gets messed up. So the reason why God told the Jews not to be having kids with all the other nations is because he needed to keep the blood pure, because he needed Messiah to come through that line. See that? Can't have half-breed Samaritans getting in the genealogy. That would cause a problem. And the Jews knew that. That's why they exiled the Samaritans, because they're not really Jews, even though they are half Jews. Old school racism, according to Americans. Oh, I can't do that. All right, Exodus chapter 3. Exodus chapter 3. Well, after 400 years, God tells them, he tells Abraham, I've determined by my foreknowledge that after 400 years, your people will be in bondage, but they shall cry unto me, and I will free them. God will free them. And so what does he do? Exodus chapter 3, he gets a new guy. And this guy, he's a very interesting guy, Moses. Moses is the lawgiver. Moses is the lawgiver. And what does God say to him? He says, who art thou, Lord? He says, take thy shoe from off thy foot, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. And he says, go and prophesy unto my people Israel and tell them the time is at hand. But what does Moses say? He says, no, I can't go. I can't be the guy. You see, when God calls people, they always alibi. I can't be the guy that you get to come and save your people. No, I can't do that. I can't talk. See, I stutter. Moses tried to alibi God how many times? But then after a while, Moses says, all right, when I go to them, whom shall I say that sent me? And God says, tell them I am sent you. What is God's name? Not Yahweh. Yikes, not Yahweh, Jehovah. What is Jehovah? I am that I am, all block letters. What a cool name. See that? I am that I am. That's just their name. These guys got their name, Ganesha, Allah, Buddhism. Yeah, Christ is a Buddhist according to Buddhism. He was like doing like this in the Middle East and India. What? Notice how all the gods of the pagans, they have all these dumb names, but they're not accurate names. You know what's an accurate name for God? This. He's eternal. So the only accurate name for a God would be I am. He just is. That's a cool name, Jehovah. My name has this name. My main name has this name, Jah. Now, what are they? The Jamaicans, they got this own cult called Rastafari, and they say, yeah, we worship Jah. Not this Jah. You got a different Jah. My Jah, he's eternal. He saved me. Exodus chapter 3, he says in verse 14, he says, and God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he says, thus thou shalt say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you. You know what's interesting about Israel? The first thing that Moses saw about God was a burning bush. The true emblem of Israel is not that star you see on their flag. The actual emblem is a burning bush. How is it that these people have been persecuted consistently for thousands of years and they don't go out? Just like the burning bush. It burns the bush, but the fire is not consumed. Israel, the nation of Israel, the Jewish people, they are the same way. You persecute them, you kill them, and they don't die because God is with them, because God has a promise. Well, if you believe the promise, the so-called Palestinians don't believe the promise. I saw a video. The guy was like, yeah, we just believe that the Jews should just stop persecuting the so-called Palestinians. So the guy asked him, so what part of that land is Palestine? He goes, yeah, you know, the West Bank, the Gaza Strip. And then that's all he said, the West Bank and Gaza Strip. That's all they kept saying. Okay, well, if they already have that land, then what's the problem? Oh, well, they also need Bethlehem and northern. Well, hold on. I thought you wanted West Bank and Gaza Strip. Which, by the way, they keep saying that song from the river to the sea. Do they even know where the river to the sea is? I don't think they know which river they're talking about. They're talking about the river of the Sea of Galilee. Are they talking about the Jordanian River? Are they talking about the Mediterranean Sea? Which river? They don't know. So-called Palestinians, they have no idea. Those Palestinians don't care about the land. Arafat, they offered them that land in 2002. The Jewish people offered them a Palestinian state in 2002, and they rejected it because Arafat's an idiot. You know why they want that land? That's to annihilate the Jews. You know who wants to annihilate the Jews? The devil. Because God promised that Messiah would come and save his Jewish people. Well, if God is a moron and he doesn't preserve the Jews, all the prophecies fail, and God lied. But he hasn't lied, because you still see these people as they somehow persecuted into oblivion. And they're still around. Still around. So then go to Exodus chapter 20. So then Moses decides he's going to go up to God on Mount Sinai. And this is where everything gets messed up. He goes to Mount Sinai. And what happens on Mount Sinai? Well, God gives him the 10 commandments. And this is probably one of the scariest parts. He says, here, look what he says here. Exodus chapter 20. Exodus chapter 20. This is the giving of the law in verse 1. And God spake all these words. I am the Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. How could you see God come down from heaven in a flaming fire, and then not like a couple days later, you know what they do? Moses is up here chilling with God for 40 days. And you know what they're doing down here? The Jews, not even 40 days, and the Jews are already committing idolatry with a golden calf. With a calf. Are you kidding? If I saw God come down in a giant fireball and torch the top of Mount Sinai, do you think my first inclination would be, let's build a golden calf? But that's human nature. Human nature is just God whips you, and then you forget 5 minutes later he whipped you, and he got to whip you again, and then you don't remember, and then you just do it over and over and over again, and you don't learn. You don't learn. So let's go to this chapter. I believe it's Exodus. We're going to look at Exodus chapter 32. Exodus 32. Exodus chapter 32. And look what happened in verse 1. And when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down out of the mount, the people gathered themselves together unto Aaron and said unto him, Up and make us gods which shall go before us. And as for this Moses, the man that brought us out of the land of Egypt, we what not is become of him. That's not true. Moses did lead them out of Egypt, but God came down and said, No, I led you out of Egypt. They saw the cloud. They saw the cloud staring at the face of Pharaoh's chariots. What do you mean Moses did? Yeah, Moses was a part of it, but God comes down and tells you, no, I was the one who did that. And they say, well, we don't know what happened to Moses, this guy. We don't know where he went. Are you kidding? That wasn't even like a couple hours ago when they said this. But that's the people. So then what happens in verse 7? And the Lord said unto Moses, Go, get thee down, for thy people which thou broughtest up out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. And verse 9, and the Lord said unto Moses, I have seen this people, and behold, it is a stiff-necked people. Wow. You know what that means? They were like this, hard-headed, like this, stiff-neck. Now, I know it's a little humorous, but if you go to a Jewish area of the city, this is still the same thing. The Jews walk around very like this, very stiff-necked. It's the same thing, man. They've never lost that. And when I read the Bible, I just laugh a little bit. I'm like, man, God is so hard on these people, right? All right, but let's keep going. So Moses, he takes the 10 commandments and he shatters it. He gets so mad, he breaks it, and God doesn't rebuke Moses for it because God understands, because he was mad too. But then God purges that generation. He kills off all the Jews that committed idolatry. And God tells them, all right, let's just keep it going, keep it moving, and we're going to go through the wilderness. So what happens? We're going to go to Numbers. All this time, they build the tabernacle. They create the altar of sanctuary, and then the Jews, they're wandering around in the wilderness. Now, why are they wandering in the wilderness? God's feeding them with manna, and God is getting ready to bring the Jews into the land of Canaan, the land which he promised. But something goes wrong. Something goes wrong. Numbers chapter 13. What goes wrong? Well, the Jews, they go to the promised land, and they see the giants, and they go, what? Moses, you brought us out here so we could die to these giants? Didn't you promise us we would go to the promised land? What's a God that we would have died in the land of Egypt? Oh, God was so mad. Numbers chapter 13, Numbers 13. It says, and there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. And look, they start crying. 14:1. And all the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night. And the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron. And the whole congregation said unto them, would God that we had died in the land of Egypt. You know how disrespectful that is to God? God was not happy. So you know what he did? He said, okay, you're not going to go into the land that I promised I would give you and have a little faith for 2 seconds. I mean, he fed them with manna. He fed them. He gave them water. He gave them housing. He would appear as a cloud by day to lead them, and he would appear as a fire by night. And the Jews told God to his face, you know, it would be better if we were in the land of Egypt. We were eating better there. Huh? Now, Christians do that. Oh, my life was better before I got saved. Christians do that. You read that, you say, no, I would never do that like the Jews. Oh, yes, you have. Yes, you have. So then God says what? He says, all right, I'm tired of you. I'm going to have you wander in the wilderness for 40 years, and all the generation that rebelled against me, I'm going to walk them in the wilderness until they die off. Then I will bring you into the promised land. Then he will bring you into the promised land. But then a problem happens. Korah shows up. And Korah is just some nothing Levite. Now think about it. You have the honor of tending to God in the tabernacle. And Korah shows up and says, oh, Moses, this is not fair. We want to be the head of the tabernacle. And God says, Lord, Moses says, Lord, what am I supposed to do? This guy he's revolting. And God says, all right. Get everybody that's on my side and bring them over here and let them stay over there. And what does God do? Korah comes to start another rebellion, and God opens the earth and swallows them into the pit, and they go to hell. Korah goes to hell. And Jude actually mentions that for your admonition. Don't do what he did. You know how many church schisms happen because someone thinks they know so much Bible and they want to teach the church instead of the pastor? I'm only doing this because the pastor, he wants me to help him. I don't mind helping. But there are people that are in the church that they think they're so smart that they want to tell the pastor how to run the church. Okay, you can go ahead and go do it. It's the same thing with Korah. He wanted to run the tabernacle. He thought he was better than Moses. Okay. And what happened for it? He paid for it in hell. You may know more Bible than the pastor, but can you run the ministry like a pastor does? I couldn't do it. I'm a chicken. Okay, so then we're going to go to Deuteronomy. And what happens? After that generation is killed off, Deuteronomy chapter 5. This generation is killed off. God wanders them in the wilderness for 40 years. 40 years in the wilderness, he wanders them. And after that 40 years, they come back to the land of Canaan, and God tells Moses, because of the sin that thou committest against me at the waters of Meribah, thou shalt surely die. Thou wilt not bring the children of Israel to the land that I swear unto their fathers. Why? Because Moses disobeyed God. He stabbed the rock again instead of speaking to the rock. Jesus is the rock. He's only to be pierced one time. The second time, you talk to the rock because he's alive. So what happens? He tells them, look at the land which I gave unto their fathers. Thou shalt not lead them into this land. Give them the law. Deuteronomy. It means the second giving of the law. That's what it means. And so God gives them that law. It's going to be in Deuteronomy. Here's the reinstitution of it. And it says in verse 1, and Moses called all Israel and said unto them, hear, O Israel, the statutes and judgments which I speak in your ears this day, that ye may learn them and keep and do them. The Lord our God made a covenant with us in Horeb. The Lord made not this covenant with our fathers, but with us, even us, who are all of us here alive this day. This is called the Mosaic covenant. This is in Deuteronomy 5:1-3. This is the Mosaic covenant. This is not the Abrahamic covenant. They are different. This one is conditional. The Abrahamic covenant is eternal. There was no conditions on it. When God gave that promise to Abraham, Abraham was asleep. He's asleep. So Abraham had no part in the covenant. He just told him, hey, Abraham, I'm going to do this. And you have no say in it. And then that was the end of it. Okay, so what happens? Well, go to Joshua chapter 5. Well, God says, okay, I'm going to bring the Jewish people into the land that I swear unto the fathers of the Jews, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But Who was there with them? Joshua chapter 5. Joshua chapter 5 and verse 13. It says, and it came to pass when Joshua was by Jericho that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there stood a man over against him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went unto him and said unto him, Art thou for us or for our adversaries? And he said, Nay, but as captain of the host of the Lord am I now come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and did worship. Do you think Joshua is worshiping any regular angel? No, it says, What saith my Lord unto his servant? And the captain of the Lord's host said unto Joshua, Loose thy shoe from off thy foot, for the place whereon thou standest is holy. Who is that? That's Jesus, the angel of the Lord. That's God Almighty. He says, I'm going to bring your people into the land of Canaan as captain of the Lord's host. You know what the Lord's host is referring to? All the host of heaven and the earth. Because Jesus is what? All things were made by him and for him. He is before all things, and by him all things consist. See that? So if he's captain of the Lord's host, that means he has authority even over Michael. That's not any regular angel. That's Jesus before he came down as a human, and before he incarnated. All right, so what happens? They go through Jericho. They topple Jericho. The captain of the Lord's host, he leads them all the way to the land of Canaan. They slaughter all the Amalekites and all their enemies, and they give every single man, every single tribe his inheritance. But something goes wrong. God, or rather Moses, told them, you are to slay every single one of your adversaries. But the Jews, you'll find many verses where it says that the Jews made them to give tribute. They didn't kill their enemies. And so what ended up happening was now they were dwelling with their enemies into the land that they were given for an inheritance. And so they started mingling with the other religions, and that created apostasy. So go to the book of Judges, chapter 10. Here comes the worst cycle, one of the worst cycles in the Bible. You get right with God, God frees you, you live victoriously, and then you go back to the sin, and you do it over and over and over again. That's the Jews. God, help us out. We're being under bondage. Okay, God helps them out. They're chilling for a couple of years. They go back to their issue. They're mingling with the other religions. Oh, God, you got to help us and get us out. We're in trouble. And they do it over and over and over and over. No one's keeping the law of Moses the way they're supposed to. Judges says that every man did that which was right in his own eyes. People were just doing what they thought was right. In the book of Judges, Jephthah, he offers up his daughter after making a vow to God that the first animal he sees come out of his house, he'll offer it after the war. And he offers up his daughter as a sacrifice. He did what was right in his own eyes. If he had read Leviticus 5, he would have known that he could have undone a vow he made to God by offering one of his other animals. But he didn't do that because he was just doing what he thought was the right thing to do instead of what God told him. That's the book of Judges. It just goes on and on and on. And God gets so frustrated. Look what he says in Judges chapter 10. Verse 10. And the children of Israel cried unto the Lord, saying, We have sinned against thee, because we have forsaken our God and have served Balaam. And the Lord said unto the children of Israel, Did not I deliver you from the Egyptians and the Amorites and the children of Ammon and from the Philistines? The Zidonians also, and the Amalekites and the Mennonites did oppress you. And ye cried to me, and I delivered you out of their hand. Yet ye have forsaken me and served other gods. Wherefore I will deliver you no more. Go and cry unto the gods which ye have chosen. Let them deliver you in your time of tribulation. Wow, that is pure, unadulterated sarcasm. Haven't I saved you all these times? How about you go to your gods and let them deliver you? That's not the God of the Bible, according to the scholars. God is sassy. But you would be too. Have you had a sibling or a child, you're raising a kid, and you tell them 5,000 times to stop doing the thing, and they keep doing it, and sometimes you just feel like telling them, okay, how about you figure it out that you know so much? That's how God feels. That's how God feels, because these are his kids. Really frustrating, right? Okay, so after many generations, we're going to go to the book of 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel chapter 8. After many generations, they go into the land of Canaan, and then they go into apostasy. Apostasy. And this apostasy goes on for a very long time. But then up shows a man. He's a righteous man. He's supposed to be from the tribe of Benjamin. and his name is King Saul. God said to Samuel, give them a king. And Samuel says, no, I don't want to give them a king. And he says, they have not rejected me, you, Samuel. They rejected me that I should not reign over them. God was their king, and they wanted a king just like the rest of the nations. That's the Christians. They want to be just like the rest of the heathen. What you need another idol for? You have God. 1 Samuel chapter 8. 1 Samuel chapter 8 and verse 10. And Samuel told all the words of the Lord unto the people that asked him of a king. And he said, this will be the manner of the king that shall reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for himself and his chariots to be his horsemen, and some shall run before his chariots, right? Now, he's going to give a description of Saul, but if you go to verse 19, it says, nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel and said, nay, but we will have a king over us. So this begins the arc of Israel, and it's called Kings. This is the chronicle of Israel's kings. Israel says, we want a king. They say, nay, we will have a king. And they choose King Saul. Go to 1 Samuel 15. But what's the problem with King Saul? He's a moron. He can't listen. King Saul tries to do everything in his own way. He's like, yeah, God, I got you. I'll do what you tell me. But how about this? Go to 1 Samuel 15. 1 Samuel 15. Now, King Saul wasn't a messed up man in the beginning. King Saul was righteous, but Samuel prophesied, in other words, that King Saul would be self-obsessed, and that was precisely his problem. He wanted to do everything in his own way. He wanted to do everything in his own way. And so we have King Saul. He didn't have to be this way, but look what he did. 1 Samuel 15, verse 1. Samuel also said unto Saul, the Lord sent me to anoint thee to be king over his people, over Israel. Now therefore hearken unto the voice of the words of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, I remember that which Amalek did to Israel, how he laid wait for him in the way when he came up from Egypt. Now go, smite Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have and spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass. But what happens? He doesn't do it. He keeps all of the items. He keeps all of the best sheep and the best items. And he goes to Samuel and Samuel says, Saul, what hast thou done? He says, but I brought you the best of the sheep. I even have this guy captive. I even brought this king captive. And he says, thou hast not obeyed the voice of the Lord. Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice. So then his kingship is removed, and David is brought in later. King David. This is a man after God's own heart. King David. God loved this man so much in spite of his sins that God promised he would have a son who would reign on the throne of David forever. And David will reign as a prince over his people Israel in eternity. But for right now, King David is the youngest of the son of Jesse. He has 8 sons. Did you notice that? Jesse has 8 sons. Now, David is the last of his sons. And he says, okay, I want to get King David. But what's the problem with King David? Well, Saul is a demon-possessed moron. He decides, nope, not going to give the kingdom to David. So he persecutes him. Now, David goes and plays the harp for King Saul to smooth out, to, make him feel better. But then because Saul is a demon-possessed maniac, he takes the javelin, and while David's playing, he just bolt tosses it. And David goes, oh, gotta run. And that happens many times, until David gets older and older. But then Saul runs into another problem. Saul gets into a war with the Philistines, and he's gonna lose. So then he gets David, and David comes over, and David says, I will smite that Philistine. Who's that Philistine? Goliath. He says, why? Because Goliath he has reproached the living God. So then David comes over, and Goliath says, what? Am I a dog that thou shalt have him to come and slay me? What happens with David? He takes the stone. He has 5 of them because there are 5 giants left in the land of Canaan. He takes one of them. Now, Goliath is so arrogant, he doesn't have his helmet on. So David slingshots it and knocks him out in one hit. Slices his head off. He comes back and says, look what I've done. Now they start singing songs about David. Well, Saul has slain his thousands, but David has slain his 10,000s. And Saul was getting very jealous that people were preferring King David over him. So then he keeps trying to kill him. Every time David is there playing his harp, he bolt tosses a javelin. And eventually, King Saul's son, Jonathan, he starts even fighting his dad, telling him, what has David done? He's done nothing amiss. So then at the end of 1 Samuel 31, they get into a war. You can look there and read over it while I'm speaking. 1 Samuel 31, there's a war. And unfortunately, Jonathan dies. Why does Jonathan die? Because Saul made a vow that if any man eats of the honey after they were tired during one of the wars they had, he shall be put to death. And so since Jonathan wasn't put to death in that moment, he had to have his death later. So they go to a war. Saul says, no, I don't want to die that way. And then he commits suicide. Maniac. So then what happens? King Saul, he gets killed off. King Saul gets killed off. King David takes the throne. And you know what happens to King David? He goes and fights that war in Ziklag. And after he comes back, he sees that woman, Bathsheba. And he says, Joab, can you go and write a letter and go tell that guy, Uriah, the Hittite, go and tell him to go to that area of that war where the mighty men are. And David takes Bathsheba to be his wife. And Uriah the Hittite is killed. He's killed. And David says, and God tells David, why hast thou done this? He says, haven't I let you have all these concubines? And if it weren't enough, I even gave you all the land. He says, but thou art a bloody house. And God promises David, from thence on, his house would have bloodshed. He would never have peace in all his days for what he did. He murdered a man and then committed adultery, a double whammy. Both those sins are worthy of death in the Old Testament law. And so you know what God does? Instead of taking his life, he takes the life of his newborn from Bathsheba and his subsequent sons, all of them. But then he has a kid by Bathsheba. And this is a man who God loved, and his name is Solomon. King Solomon takes the throne of his father David. And David tells God, I want to build you a temple. And God says, no. What is this? Shall I dwell in a house made with hands? See that? And then King Solomon, he tells him, no, your son, King Solomon, he's going to make it for me because he will have peace in all his days. And King Solomon takes the throne, and King David tells Solomon, I know that thou art a wise man. And God comes to Solomon, he says, Solomon, what will it be that I shall give unto thee? And Solomon says, he doesn't ask for long life or riches or honor. He says that he may have just judgment. For a young man, that's a pretty wise thing to ask for. So all the kings of the earth, they come to King Solomon, and they sell Solomon, for example, the Queen of Sheba, and she comes to hear of all the wisdom of King Solomon. And after she hears the wisdom of King Solomon, she says, wow, you are exceeding even what I thought, even for what I've heard. And there's a problem, though. King Solomon lives for many decades, but then he starts to give in to the idolatry. His first wife, who's King Solomon's first wife? Pharaoh's daughter. Ooh, Pharaoh's daughter. That's not good. That's not good. Didn't God tell the Jews not to mess with Egypt? And so his heart was taken away by the strange women, and he ended up having 1,000 wives. And he gave us one of the greatest books in the Old Testament, Ecclesiastes. Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher, all is vanity. What profit hath a man taken of all his labor under the sun? One generation passeth away, another generation cometh, yet the earth abideth forever. That's Solomon. You know that the wisdom in that book is so profound that the stupid scholars, instead of saying the preacher, they change it to the teacher. They want to take credit for Solomon's wisdom. You'll never be half as smart as Solomon. None of us will ever even, we'll never even approach a tenth of the wisdom that he had. Because he said that no man before thee or after thee shall be as wise as ye are. Now, it's a pretty big feat. So Jesus shows up. You know what Jesus says? Jesus says, behold, a greater than Solomon is here. That's a pretty high bar. Solomon was a mere human, but he had supernatural wisdom that was given by God. Only God manifest in the flesh could exceed Solomon's wisdom. He experienced everything there was to experience in life. Okay, so then you go to 1 Kings. 1 Kings, and we're going to look at this story here. Now, verse 11. Chapter 11. 1 Kings chapter 11. 1 Kings chapter 11. Now, here's a problem. Well, the problem is when King Solomon sins, there's an issue. What is the issue? Well, in Israel, they had two kingdoms. But before Solomon sinned, they were joined together. What are the kingdoms? You have the northern kingdom, Israel, also known in the Old Testament as Ephraim in Hosea. And then you have the southern kingdom, Judah. But when Solomon sins, God tells Ahijah the prophet, go and tell Solomon, behold, he rends 12 pieces of garments. And he says, I will give to thee 10 pieces of garments, for these 10 are the house of the children of Israel, the northern kings. And I will give the two southern kingdom, the two tribes, to thy son Rehoboam. So up in the north, you have the king Jeroboam. And in the south on the bottom, you have King Rehoboam, the son of Jeroboam. Now, who's in Judah? Well, Judah is the house of David. House of David. But what happens? What happens to the kings? What ends up happening is that all the sons of this guy are they're idolaters. The worst kind of idolaters. It gets so bad that this house, Jeroboam, joins to Jezebel. That's good. This man, Jeroboam, he's an idolater, and his house joins to Jezebel because Ahab joined with her. Who is Jezebel? Jezebel is the daughter of the Zidonians. Who are the Zidonians? Only the worst pagans at the time. She's their daughter of the king. And so these kingdoms split. So God gets very frustrated. You know what he says? Go to 2 Kings 15. 2 Kings 15. After years and years and years and years of putting up with the nation of Israel, God says, you know what? I'm going to take this northern kingdom captive. So God says, all right, Israel, no more. I'm sick of your nonsense. He takes this tribe up here, northern Israel, and who takes them captive? 2 Kings 15, verse 27. In 52nd year of Azariah, king of Judah, Pekah, the son of Remaliah, began to reign over Israel in Samaria and reigned 20 years. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. He departed not from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin. In the days of Pekah, king of Israel, came Tilgath-Pileser, king of Assyria, and took Ijon and Albeth-Maachah, and Jonah and Kadesh, and Hazor and Gilead, Galilee, and all the land of Naphtali he carried away to Assyria captive. You see that? So God took them captive. So all the children of Israel in the northern kingdom, they're gone. They're gone. They're captive. These people up here, they're all idolaters. But the house of David is not up here. God says in Hosea, Ephraim is joined to idols. Let him alone. So God takes them captive. Now you have this final thing down here. The only tribe left is Judah. Go to Isaiah 37. Isaiah 37. Now, even though the house of Judah was righteous and they kept the feast of the Lord, they too went into apostasy slowly. Go to this chapter. Go to Isaiah 38. 37. And what ends up happening? Well, these men are taken captive by king of Assyria. His name is Tilgath-Pileser. I'll put it Tilgath for short. They're taken captive. But there's a problem. After many years after he dies, another king of Assyria shows up. And what is his name? His name is Sennacherib. He is one of the greatest antichrists in the Old Testament. And Sennacherib comes, and look what he tells him, Hezekiah. Now, Hezekiah is one of the sons of Rehoboam, King Hezekiah. He's one of the greatest kings that Israel ever had, second to Josiah. We'll get to Josiah in a minute. Okay, now what happens in Isaiah 37? this man, Sennacherib, he is threatening to destroy Judah. Judah is the final house of all the tribes of the children of Israel. And look what happens. Isaiah 37. He says in verse 7. No, verse 6. And Isaiah said unto them, thus shall ye say to your master, thus saith the Lord, be not afraid of the word which thou hast heard, wherewith the servants of the king of Assyria have blasphemed me. And behold, I will send a blast upon him, and he shall hear a rumor, and return unto his own land, and I will cause him to fall by the sword in his own land. Verse 8, so Rabshakeh returned and found the king of Assyria warning against Libnah, for he had heard that he was departed from Lachish. You see that? Now look what Rabshakeh tells the Jews as a threat. He says in verse 10, thus shall ye speak to Hezekiah, king of Judah, saying, let not thy God in whom thou trustest deceive thee, saying, Jerusalem shall not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. Behold, thou hast heard what the king of Assyria have done to the land by destroying them utterly. And shalt thou be delivered? That's a threat. He says, verse 12, have the gods of the nations delivered them which my fathers have destroyed, as Gozan and Haran and Rezeph and the children of Eden, which were in Telassar? Where is the king of Hamath and the king of Arphad and the king of the city of Sepharvim, Hannah and Eva? So Rabshakeh is threatening them. Who has been delivered out of my hand? Haven't I conquered all these gods? Who is your God that he will deliver you, Israel? Referring to Hezekiah. These are taken captive. The only tribe left is Judah. They're all by themselves. By no account of logic should they survive. But then look what God does. Look what God does. Verse 21, then Isaiah the son of Amos sent unto Hezekiah, saying, thus saith the Lord God of Israel, whereas thou hast prayed to me against Sennacherib, king of Assyria. This is the word which the Lord hath spoken concerning him. The virgin daughter of Zion hath despised thee and laughed thee to scorn. The daughter of Jerusalem has shaken her head at thee. Look what God says. Whom hast thou reproached and blasphemed? And against whom hast thou exalted thy voice and lifted up thine eyes on high? Even against the Holy One of Israel. By thy servants thou hast reproached the Lord, and hast said, by the multitude of my chariots am I come up to the heights of the mountains, to the sides of Lebanon. And I will cut down the tall cedars thereof, and I will enter into the height of his border and the forest of his Carmel. But look what God says in verse 28. But I know thy abode and thy going out and thy coming in and thy rage against me, because thy rage against me and thy tumult is come up into mine ears. Therefore I will put my hook in thy nose and thy bridle in thy lips, and I will turn thee back by the way which thou camest. See that? God is telling Sennacherib, you're not even going to come here. I'm going to send you right back where you came along. And he says in verse 32, for out of Jerusalem shall go forth a remnant, and they that escape of Mount Zion, the zeal of the Lord of hosts shall do this. Verse 34. By the way that he came, by the same he shall return, and shall not come into this city, saith the Lord. For I will defend this city to save it for mine own sake, and for my servant David's sake. Then the angel of the Lord went forth and smote in the camp of the Assyrians 185,000. The angel of the Lord came down and personally slew the entire army of the Assyrians. That's history, not mythology. Anytime the angel of the Lord draws his blade, somebody dies. There's only one time that it didn't, and then the guy died later, and that was Balaam. All right, so then what happens? Hezekiah, you know his sin. He shows all the men of Babylon his goods, and God says, all right. And all his sons are going to be eunuchs. They're all going to be eunuchs. All right, so then what happens? Go to Jeremiah 43. So then Hezekiah, all the kings after Hezekiah, they mess up. Then Josiah shows up after many kings later, and Josiah brings the greatest revival in Israel that they ever had. But the second he dies, Israel fumbles the bag again. And it goes so bad that eventually at the end, there's one more man. And what is his name? Zedekiah. This guy is a goofball. I don't mean that in a good way. This guy is a character. He goes to Jeremiah and he says, Jeremiah, I won't kill you, but can you tell me what the word of the Lord is? And Jeremiah says, if you don't resist, if you let Nebuchadnezzar come in and take you captive, you will not die. But if you fight them, know of a surety you will die. And you know what Zedekiah does? He goes and fights Nebuchadnezzar, and he gets slaughtered. He gets his eyes poked out, and he takes him away captive. Why would somebody go and ask God for counsel and then immediately not do what God tells them? The Christians do that. Look what the Bible says. Doesn't the Bible say this? They're not going to do it. In Ezekiel, God says that although they hear your words, they will not do them. Israel was coming to inquire of the prophets with zero intention to do anything that the prophets were telling them. That is what the current day Laodicean Christians are doing. See that? You don't want to be that way. Don't be like the Jews. You can learn a lot from the children of Israel in the Old Testament. You got to read the Old Testament, right? All right, Jeremiah 43. Jeremiah 43. Okay, so look at this complete irony. Now imagine, you're the Jews, and you tell Jeremiah, we want to go to Egypt, because we know if we go to Egypt, we'll be safe. You know the disrespect? God brought you out of the land of Egypt, and now you're telling him, yeah, we're going to be under the hand of Pharaoh. So these goofballs, they want to go to be safe with a man named Pharaoh Necho. Now, who is Pharaoh Necho? He is Pharaoh Necho II. And this is one of the last kings of Egypt during this time. And God, in his anger against Israel, utterly annihilates this man in a battle called the Battle of Carchemish. This is one of the most embarrassing battles that Egypt ever had. Now, why would the Jews do this? Look at this in Jeremiah 42. Jeremiah 42, verse 19. The Lord hath said concerning you, O remnant of Judah, go ye not into Egypt. Know certainly that I have admonished you this day. For ye disassembled in your hearts when ye sent unto me to the Lord your God, saying, pray for us unto the Lord our God, according unto all that the Lord our God shall say, so declare unto us, and we will do it. Well, that's a lie, because look at the next verse. And now I have this day declared it to you, but ye have not obeyed the voice of the Lord your God, nor anything for which he hath sent me unto you. Therefore know certainly that ye shall die by the sword, etc., etc. Wow. So Jonathan goes to ask Jeremiah, what's going to happen, Jeremiah? With zero intention to do what he said. So unfortunately, they get taken captive. Nebuchadnezzar shows up, and he just utterly destroys the Jews, man. Like it was a slaughter. Go to Lamentations chapter 5. Lamentations chapter 5. It was a horrible, horrible war. The Jews were eating their own kids. They were cannibalizing each other. Now, some of them were left there, but it was just a horrific war. Lamentations chapter 5. Lamentations chapter 5. Look what it says. It says in verse 14, the elders have ceased from the gate, the young men from their music. The joy of our heart is ceased, and our dance is turned into mourning. The crown is fallen from our head. The whole Bible is about the kingdom. They lost the kingdom. The Jews lost the kingdom. Temporarily anyway. Now you know the story. Ezra is called. God says, all right, Ezra, come here. We're going to restore Israel. Them and Nehemiah, they go back to build the wall. They go back to sanctify the temple. But the second the Jews get right with God, what do? They start having kids with the pagans. And a very sad thing happens. They have to get divorced. There are forced divorces that take place at the end of Nehemiah and Ezra. Very, very sad. Now, the remnant that's stuck in Babylon, under Persia, that remnant was under Esther. And Haman tried to have the Jews annihilated. But God came in at the last moment, and Mordecai ended up reigning in the king of Persia for a short while. Now, what ends up happening after that? Nehemiah prays to God, Lord, remember me, for they have defiled thy priesthood. Now, you know it's bad when even God's teachers and scribes go bad. Then what is God supposed to do? We're going to continue. Let's go to the book of Ezekiel 13. Ezekiel 13. No, the Old Testament is no good. The Old Testament is awesome, man. I mean, it's a rough read. I know, all the numbers and the names. But God put that there to see if you're really going to read the book. I got to read about some guy's kids. Well, I got to read about some guy named Jabez. He prays to God and then never shows up for the rest of the Bible in 1 Chronicles 4, 9-10, right? What's the point in that, right? Why I got to know that this kid's guy had a camel and he had like 40 ounces of barley? What does that do for me, right? But you got to live by every word of God. Not just the cool stuff. You got to live by the boring stuff too, because God knows that life is boring sometimes. Life is not all fun and games. You don't think the author of life knows that? Ezekiel 13, verse 1, and the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, prophesy against the prophets of Israel that prophesy, and say unto them that prophesy out of their own hearts, Hear ye the word of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord God, Woe unto the foolish prophets that follow, Woe unto the foolish prophets that follow their own spirits and have seen nothing. If any one of you fell for that idiot African guy that said the rapture was on the Feast of Tabernacles, shame on you. Shame on you. You should not be, come on, man. Haven't we grown up with the whole Nigerian prince scam? Who's going to fall for, the rapture's going to be in September. Oh, come on. Christians are so gullible on YouTube, trying to teach me the Bible. You can't teach me the Bible unless you already believe it. If you don't believe this book, there's nothing for you to teach me. See that? You got the book right here, man. You got the King James, not the new King Jimmy. Go to Malachi chapter 4. Now, after a while, God prophesies of a couple kingdoms. And he says, okay, Daniel, the Messiah is going to come in 70 weeks and do all his stuff. And so he says, okay, Daniel, look at this image that Nebuchadnezzar had. And he says, okay, thou art the head of gold, Nebuchadnezzar. And then what comes after Babylon? Persia. What comes after Persia? Greece. What comes after that? Rome. And so at the end, look what God tells them. And we're going to end it off here. After pain and sorrow and God putting up with the Jews and trying to get them to repent and trying to get them to get right and trying to get them to be his people, look how offensive the Jews were being to God. Malachi chapter 1, verse 1, the burden of the word of the Lord to Israel by Malachi. Notice that the burden here is not Malachi's burden. It's the Lord's burden, because verse 2 says, I have loved you, saith the Lord. Yet ye say, wherein thou hast loved us? Was not Esau Jacob's brother? Yet I hated Esau. Jacob have I loved, but Esau I hated. The God of Islam doesn't love anybody. You see that? Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated. He said, the seed of Abraham, my friend. God has friends? You ever think about that? God Almighty has friends? See, that's a personal thing. You don't get in any other faith. I think there was a story of a preacher, and he went to a Muslim, and he asked him, what did Muhammad do for you? He's like, well, he gave us the Shahada and gave us this and that. And he said, no. But what did he do for you? And the Muslim wasn't understanding. And the preacher said, well, my prophet died for me. What did he do for you? See, our prophet died for us and gave us a perfect book. So that's the synopsis of the Old Testament. What are the last verses in the Old Testament? Malachi chapter 4. Behold, I send you Elijah the prophet, who shall come before the great and dreadful day of the Lord, who shall turn the fathers to their sons and the heart of the sons to their fathers, lest I shall come and smite the earth with a curse. And the Old Testament ends with a curse. You know how you know we have the full Bible? New Testament ends with grace, not a curse. See that? Full revelation. Since the Jews are still with the Tanakh, they're under a curse because they've stayed with the curse. Like, if you're saved, curse got no grip on you, man. So I'll close it out on there.